When I hit rock bottom in my life and decided to end it, I found myself on a rooftop. But even there, someone else was already occupying the spot. "Excuse me, but this is the place I picked," they said. It happened on the day of a dance competition. I failed, missing out on any awards due to a mistake. My teacher tried to comfort me, saying it was just bad luck. 20 minutes later, an unexpected car accident proved my luck could, in fact, get worse. While I was catching some wind on the rooftop, someone with a cast on their arm came over and patted me. "Excuse me, but this is the place I picked." Frustrated, I snapped, "What? You think you can jump, and I can't?" The wind lifted strands of his hair, revealing a pair of pitch-black eyes. He replied calmly, "If the two of us jump together, the news will call it a love pact." When someone is down on their luck, even their chosen spot to die becomes contested. This spot had the perfect view, high enough, facing the river, and with no roads below to worry about hitting anyone or anything. The hospital building faced this tower directly. After observing it for more than half a month, I was sure this was an ideal location when I finally sat on the edge. And yet, someone else had the same idea. The guy was tall, with broad shoulders. His slightly long hair framed a refined, almost delicate face. The cast on his arm even looked like some kind of fashion accessory, if you ignored the strong emotions in his eyes. I silently sighed. A guy this good-looking? I would have much preferred meeting him on a tree-lined campus path instead of on a rooftop like this. We both understood why the other was here. I wore my favorite dress, simply wanting to leave this world with some dignity. Suppressing my irritation, I forced a polite smile. "How about we have a talk?" He glanced at me coolly before stepping closer to the edge and sitting down right next to me, giving the distinct impression of someone staking out a spot in a library. "What about?" he asked. "What indeed?" Should I tell him there are still many things worth holding on to in life? Urge him to think of the people who'd grieve for him? Or maybe suggest he wait a few years and by then he could get a cybernetic arm that's all the rage? In moments of despair, comforting words ring hollow. Pain is personal. If you can't get through it, you just can't. So, I chose to be direct. "What do you do for a living?" He didn't hide it. "I'm an artist." I took a deep breath. His right hand was tightly wrapped in a cast, the severity of the injury evident. Still, being an artist didn't seem like a reason to die. "Well, being left-handed isn't so bad," I joked. It was a grim attempt at humor. But then again, once you're on a rooftop like this, a few dark jokes hardly matter. You could still draw, with your left hand, right? With some practice? He didn't respond. The atmosphere grew heavy. Perhaps I should have been more tactful, but I wasn't in the state to play the role of a caring mentor. All I wanted was for him to give up the spot before sunset. I persisted. "What kind of art do you do?" He stared at the sky, lost in thought. "Meticulous style painting," he finally said. That explained a lot. My grandfather also painted meticulous style works. As a child, I often watched him painstakingly outline every detail with his brush. For this kind of art, you needed steady hands and immense precision. It demanded a level of technical mastery few could achieve. I understood.
Truly I did.
But I still wanted to negotiate. Lowering my voice, I said, "How about picking another spot? You know, for someone like me, it wasn't easy to even get up here." He didn't budge. Instead, he casually sat beside me. His dark eyes met mine. Does chivalry still apply in this situation? His remark caught me off guard. After mulling it over for a while, I decided to play the pity card. "I messed up during my competition," I began. My teacher tried to console me, saying there's always next year. But right after I left the venue, I got hit by a car. I flew through the air and landed right in front of her. She fainted before I did. I chuckled self-deprecatingly. The doctors saved my leg, but high-intensity activities like dancing are out of the question. You have no idea how competitive this field is. One slip and you're replaced by someone younger, more talented. I worked so hard to pass the entrance exam, thinking my struggles were finally over. It was strange. Some things were easier to share with a stranger. I only know how to dance. I've been dancing for nearly 15 years. You're an artist, you must understand. There are no shortcuts in our fields. I've trained day after day just for that moment on stage. But now, 15 years of effort are meaningless. My leg is ruined. I can't even walk normally, let alone dance. My life is over. These words I couldn't say to my teacher or classmates. I kept silent, afraid they'd notice my despair. I didn't even dare cry openly. I was terrified they'd realize I was planning to end it all. He calmly unbuttoned his shirt, tearing off the hem to hand to me. I didn't bring tissues. This will have to do. Without hesitation, I wiped my tears with the fabric. Even after my emotional outpouring, he remained steady, unmoved. I couldn't sway him in the slightest. "Do you have to pick this spot?" I asked. He turned to look at me, his dark eyes reflecting the orange hues of the sunset. "Why did you pick it?" he asked in return. The setting sun reached its peak brilliance at that moment, painting the sky in vibrant shades of gold and orange, like a breathtaking masterpiece. If I could, I'd drown in those colors. But the spectacle lasted only a moment. After the radiance faded, all that remained was the dim, bluish-gray twilight. The sunset was already over. I stepped away from the edge and said to him, "Let me treat you to dinner." It was inexplicable how I ended up at a noodle shop with the man who had fought me for a spot. Both of us stood out, me with a crutch and him with his arm in a sling, drawing plenty of curious glances. The man, however, seemed unfazed by the attention. He picked a table and sat down silently. Even after we placed our orders, he didn't grumble something like, "This is what you're treating me to?" He was unusually quiet, to the point it felt deliberate. And it's often those kinds of people who suppress their emotions the most. I couldn't ignore the subtle pain I had glimpsed in his eyes on the rooftop. The noodle soup smelled divine. When 2 steaming bowls were brought to our table, I happily handed him a pair of chopsticks. I tried their delivery the other day when I was craving noodles. "You've got to try this. It's so good." The aroma of fish and cured ham mixed with some kind of spice teased my senses. Unable to resist, I took a big bite. Then I glanced up at him. He struggled to lift a bite of noodles with his left hand. Just as he was about to get it to his mouth, the noodles slipped off, leaving only a couple hanging on his chopsticks. He shot me a reproachful look. That's when it hit me. I had completely forgotten. Of all the foods I could have picked on the street, from rice dishes to burgers, I had to choose noodles, which he could barely manage. It almost seemed like I was teasing him on purpose. I can't stand being misunderstood. "Move over a bit." I got up and switched seats, moving from across the table to sit beside him. He looked at me, surprised, as I picked up a mouthful of noodles and held it to his mouth. "Eat." His expression went blank for a few seconds before he finally opened his mouth. Perhaps feeding someone like this was just too intimate. For a moment, we must have looked like a peculiar couple, 2 wounded souls sharing a tender moment. After only a few bites, a staff member approached us, glancing at us with a mix of sympathy and warmth. She bent down and softly said, "Excuse me, you 2 happen to be our 1,000th customers, so your meal is on the house." Stunned, I stared at her, then at the noodles in my hand. That's not necessary. My pride kicked in, and I hastily pulled out some cash. "We'll pass the luck on to the next customer." The staff member accepted my insistence, but quietly brought us a small complimentary side dish afterward. He suddenly asked, "Why do you carry so much cash?" "Travel fare," I replied, "for my next life, so I can be reborn into better circumstances." He took my words seriously. "In that case, you should use the ones from Heaven Bank. This kind of cash won't work there." I sighed. I'd still need somewhere to exchange it. Night fell, and the streetlights flickered on. We parted ways outside the shop. I didn't say goodbye, thinking we'd never meet again. I didn't ask for his name, either, because it didn't seem necessary. Encounters like this usually happen only once in a lifetime. And that's enough. When I returned to my hospital room, the caretaker, Auntie, looked pale. She hurried over to support me. "Miss Gone, where have you been? You nearly scared me to death. I was about to call the police." Seeing her sweat-drenched face, I felt a twinge of guilt. But then I caught sight of the phone she was trying to hide behind her back. A sense of foreboding crept in. "Did you call my dad?" Startled, she quickly shook her head. No, but you should keep your phone on. It's the only way your family and friends can contact you." My phone had been off for a month, tucked away in a cabinet. When I was first hospitalized, the flood of notifications and missed calls made me feel overwhelmed, even with the sound turned off. I had spent a month trying to adjust, only to find it impossible. "What did my dad say?" She smiled. "He said he'll come visit you next Monday." Next Monday? I did the math. It was the day after the end of the high school entrance exams. Oh. I pulled the blanket over my head and thought maliciously, perfect timing to collect my corpse. The rooftop door was locked. This building was a commercial complex. The lower floors housed a mall, and while the rooftop wasn't crowded, it wasn't entirely deserted either. The planters and benches weren't just for show. Still, locking the door felt absurd. The man from yesterday now stood beside me, and as our eyes met, no words were necessary. Today, he wore a gray shirt, matching the gloomy sky above. He cast me a cold glance. "I've never had a problem coming here before." His comment stung, and I looked down at my crutch and cast. My presence made me impossible to ignore. My movements must have alarmed the staff. I sighed. "Do you have a backup spot?" "No," he replied curtly. Like two sentinels, we stood at the door until, defeated, we turned and left. One ahead and one behind, we emerged from the elevator. The cleaning staff eyed us warily, while the security guards acted like they were in a spy movie, pretending to patrol casually while sneaking glances at us. We scurried out of the building like rats. The cicadas' incessant chirping grated on my nerves. "Where to next?" I asked. "Dinner." He nodded slightly. My treat this time. And so, once again, I inexplicably found myself eating with him, this time holding a sandwich by the roadside. The shop behind us was packed, and the cool air spilling out helped temper the heat. This was revenge. It had to be. Balancing on my crutch while holding a giant sandwich, I must have looked ridiculous. He suddenly laughed, as though reading my mind. "It's not revenge. We just have bad luck. No seats today." I nodded in agreement. One of us was missing an arm, the other a leg. We really were down on our luck. He struggled to tear open the wrapper for me. "Try it, it's good." The mix of ham, cheese, and shrimp was delightful. For 10 minutes, I fell briefly in love with the world. Together, we watched the city's sunset. The high-rises blazed gold before fading to darkness once more. This time, before parting, I asked for his name. "What's your name?" "Su Yiming. E for radiance, Ming for brightness." The name felt a bit of a mouthful. "And yours?" "Gon Chi. Gon for licorice, Chi for jade." A rare surname. Yeah. When we were born, our elders had such beautiful hopes for us. Yiming, meaning radiant and bright. Chi, meaning a precious gem. We weren't born flawed. Once, we were our family's treasures. But unfortunately, this second encounter made our chance meeting feel less ordinary. So this time, I didn't immediately turn away. Instead, I watched his figure disappear into the distance. When I hobbled back to the hospital, something strange happened again. I saw his figure in the corridor of the inpatient department. The only difference was that he went upstairs while I stayed below. From afar, even one of the nurses greeted him. Everything was starting to feel surreal. Later that evening during rounds, my intense gaze made the nurse pause. "What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" I quickly pulled the curtain closed and whispered like a conspirator, "Nurse, do you know Su Yiming?" At the mention of his name, Her expression faltered. After a moment, she nodded. She didn't ask how I knew his name. Instead, with a mix of regret and sadness, she simply said, "Of course I know him. The truth is, everyone in this world has their own share of misfortunes. On the day I was rushed to the hospital after my car accident, there was an incident involving a violent patient. A man with malicious intent walked calmly into the room, drew out a fruit knife, and without hesitation, stabbed toward the doctor. It all happened in a split second. That doctor was exceptional, a leading expert in his field. His surgeries were booked up until the following year, and countless patients were waiting for him to save their lives. The attacker's reason? He claimed the doctor's attitude toward him after the surgery hurt his pride. "That's just an excuse," the nurse said indignantly. His condition wasn't even that serious in the beginning, but he insisted on trying questionable remedies and delayed treatment. By the time he came in, it was too late. Even a successful surgery couldn't restore him to his previous health. He was suffering, so he wanted others to suffer too. Thankfully, there were others in the doctor's office that day, patients and their family members. In the moment the knife lunged toward the doctor, Su Yiming instinctively rushed forward to stop the attacker, and another family member even shielded the doctor with their own body. The nurse's eyes turned red. That patient's family had been waiting for surgery for months. They saw hope for their child's recovery, so they risked everything to protect the doctor. Luckily, Dr. Wang wasn't harmed, but it's such a pity about Su Yiming. His arm was injured while subduing the attacker. The nurse left, and I couldn't remember what else she said after that. I was lost in the shocking truth. So, people really are different. Su Yiming was injured because he saved someone, a doctor, no less. That means he also saved countless families. Compared to my meaningless suffering, his experience was almost theatrically heroic. And yet, this same person had to fight with me for a little slice of the rooftop. He doesn't deserve to die. That day, as I completed my 16th lap around the hospital courtyard, I saw Su Yiming. I don't really believe in fate, or in the idea that everything happens for a reason. But his eyes, as calm as the sea, made it seem like nothing in this world could faze him. He asked, "What are you doing here?" I could clearly hear the pounding of my heart in my chest. I thought this must be destiny. Destiny brought me to meet him again and again, a man both so similar to me and yet so different. I wasn't supposed to interfere in his life. But isn't this fate? I forced a smile. "Do you have any wishes you haven't fulfilled?" At my ordinary age of 19, I decided to do something extraordinary. I was going to save this man. Today was a sunny day, and I dragged Su Yiming onto the subway with me. He didn't ask why we were at the same hospital or where I was taking him. Throughout the ride, I could feel his gaze resting heavily on me. After more than 10 stops, we finally reached our destination. We followed the crowd out of the station, and there it was, the giant Ferris wheel in the distance. It was part of a large theme park. When the park first opened, swarms of visitors made headlines, and it didn't take long for it to become the city's iconic tourist attraction. Even though it wasn't far from my home, I'd never been there, despite it being open for nearly 10 years. The park is known as the happiest place in the city. Back in school, my class organized a trip there, but the class monitor deliberately skipped over me when taking sign-ups. At the time, I had just returned after taking a week off for a competition. I didn't even have time to recover from the physical exhaustion before I had to catch up on schoolwork. Drained both physically and mentally, I rested my head on the desk during a break and overheard my classmates whispering nearby. "Should we invite her?" The monitor's voice carried a hint of mockery. "Forget it. She's not like us." In that moment, I felt an inexplicable urge to cry. I wasn't the only art student in the class, but I was the only one pouring all my energy into the dance studio and private lessons. Teachers had approached my family multiple times, but eventually they gave up on me. Strict training consumed most of my time, leaving my academic performance barely passable. But to them, none of that mattered. This was the path they chose for me. I had no way out, and could only follow it to the end. And now, that path had truly led to darkness. "Are you nearsighted?" A male voice snapped me out of my thoughts. I realized I had been staring at the theme park's rules for quite a while. The staff gave me a sympathetic look. Embarrassed, I cleared my throat. It wasn't even the weekend, yet there was still a sizable line to get in. Near the park's entrance, a crowd had gathered around the wishing fountain. "Since we're here, why don't we make a wish too?" As we walked closer, Su Yiming said dryly, "If wishing fountains worked, would we have met on the rooftop?" He was even more pessimistic than I was. I glanced at his hands. The uninjured one was slender, with long, well-defined fingers. If he didn't draw, he could surely do something else equally remarkable. Earlier, I'd asked him downstairs at the hospital if there was something he wanted to do. He didn't answer, but I figured asking again might get a response. "Give it a try. Maybe it'll come true." I shoved a coin into his hand. Su Yiming looked at me. "Will it really work?" "Everything will come true." He clasped the coin in his palm and said seriously, "I want the original Snow Bamboo by Su Shi." Then, he tossed the coin into the fountain, where it created a small splash. Suspicious, I pulled out my phone and searched for this so-called snow bamboo painting. The first sentence on its Wikipedia page said, "Currently housed in a museum." I was speechless. There was no way I could make that happen. Clearly, reality doesn't work like TV dramas. I frowned, my expression caught between disbelief and frustration. "Aren't you going to make a wish?" he asked. I will. He looked up at the blazing sun. "I'm going to get some ice cream." While he walked away, I took out a coin and clasped it between my hands. "I wish," I murmured, "that Su Yiming still has something in this world worth holding on to." The coin landed perfectly in the water. "Are you done?" I turned around to see Su Yiming awkwardly holding two oversized cartoon-themed ice cream cones with one hand. "Pick one." I chose the cute little bear-shaped cone. The chocolate flavor melted on my tongue, flooding my senses with sweetness. Ice cream had always been a forbidden indulgence for a dance student, but it really was as good as the commercials claimed. At the ticket booth, the staff eyed us for a moment and then reminded us, "If either of you has any physical limitations, some attractions may not be accessible. But don't worry, our park offers complete accessibility services to ensure a great experience for everyone." The enormous park was filled with laughter and joy. Feeling a little overwhelmed, I walked to the nearest attraction, but the long line made me hesitate. The staff enthusiastically said, "Could I have your contact information?" I didn't have my phone with me, so Su Yiming provided his. "You don't need to wait in line," they continued. "I've made a reservation for you. You can enjoy other attractions first, and we'll notify you when it's time to use the fast track." Surprised, I asked, "You can do that?" "Of course. We offer special accommodations for our guests with unique needs." For some reason, I didn't find their words offensive. Turning to Su Yiming, I said, "Who would have thought two invalids like us could enjoy VIP treatment?" The staff, however, sternly corrected me, "Please don't refer to yourself that way. We want every guest to feel happy here." I was struck by their words, and as I turned back, I noticed Su Yiming smiling. He pulled a tissue from his pocket and handed it to me. "Are you in grade school? How did you manage to get ice cream all over your face?" He held up his phone, showing me the mess I'd made of myself. Seeing the photo, I couldn't help but laugh. He laughed too. We kept playing until the sun began to set. Finally, we boarded the Ferris wheel I had been looking forward to all day. As it rose higher and higher, I saw the brilliant sunset, even more stunning than the one from the rooftop. Su Yiming chose that moment to speak. "Don't get any funny ideas. If something happens here, it could scar a lot of kids for life." Ignoring his nonsense, I leaned against the glass and asked, "Are you feeling even a little happy?" "A little." "Then, would you consider giving up on your plan to end your life?" He gazed deeply at me and asked in return, "Would you?" It's only when the knife cuts into your own flesh that you truly understand pain. How could anyone else possibly understand? I sighed. You know, when I was a kid, I thought I'd never come here. Who would have guessed it was only a dozen subway stops away? A lot of things in this world aren't set in stone. What seems impossible now might not always be impossible. Nice motivational speech, he said flatly. I didn't lose heart. So, did it inspire you even a little? After a pause, he turned toward the dazzling sunset and said softly, a little. I smiled, genuinely and wholeheartedly. That was enough. Charging the phone and turning it on. Perhaps because I now had something to look forward to, even the glaring red missed calls didn't seem as irritating. I pulled out the note given to me by the staff and dialed the number. The ringing went on for a while. Just as I was about to give up, I finally heard his cool voice. Hello. I smiled secretly. Mr. Su, I'd like to invite you to an art exhibition tomorrow. Are you free? There was silence on the other end for quite some time. Ganshi, are you out of your mind, rubbing salt into my wounds like this? Su Yiming's exasperation was almost palpable through the phone. This is called exposure therapy. Face your fears head on. Stop reading those nonsensical books. I laughed. You're planning to leave this world soon anyway. Indulge me before you go. So, are you free tomorrow? A soft chuckle came from his end. 9 o'clock tomorrow, downstairs. Don't forget to let your nurse know. Got it. I couldn't contain my excitement and rolled around on the bed. Then I got up, limping over to rummage through my clothes. At 7 o'clock, the nurse was surprised to see me up so early. When I told her I was going to an art exhibition, she asked with concern, should I go with you? It's not convenient for you to go alone. Under normal circumstances, I might have been defensive, but this time I grinned. No worries, I'm going with a friend. He'll take care of me. A friend, huh? That's good. It's nice to get out and take your mind off things. The excitement stayed with me until I saw Su Yiming. Today, he wore a light blue short-sleeved shirt, as refreshing as the sky above. It suddenly occurred to me that at this moment, we looked like we were on a date. Well, so be it. I'm dying anyway. Am I not allowed to go on a date? Su Yiming. I called out to him. My voice must have been too loud, as it drew the attention of an elderly man exercising nearby. The man looked at me, then at him, and suddenly chuckled. You two are quite the pair, one with a broken arm and the other with a broken leg. How did that happen? My face turned beet red. Panicked, I tugged at Su Yiming to leave quickly, but with my crutch, I couldn't move fast. We could still hear the old man laughing from a distance. Have you eaten breakfast? He asked. I nodded, lying. Yes, I have. He narrowed his eyes. Oh, I haven't. Why don't you join me? And so, we ended up at a breakfast stall. The warm bowl of red bean porridge went down, and I felt at ease. After eating, we took the subway. It was crowded at this hour, but as soon as we boarded, people offered their seats to us. A sight for sore eyes, I suppose. Su Yiming seemed slightly embarrassed. After helping me to a seat, he chose to stand in front of me, refusing to sit across. Thank you, but she needs me. I'll stand, he said. I could hardly believe he said something so self-serving to preserve his dignity. Sure enough, people misunderstood and praised our good relationship. I tugged at his shirt, making him bend down, so I could whisper in his ear. What is it? His warm breath brushed against my ear, making my face burn. Su Yiming, you're shameless. He chuckled softly. It's rush hour and the train is packed. One seat is enough. Two would feel excessive. So, he was a moral paragon, and I had wrongfully judged him. I was left speechless. Thankfully, our stop wasn't far. Once we arrived at the exhibition hall, I checked the e-ticket and realized it was an oil painting exhibition. Crap. In my rush to invite him yesterday, I hadn't checked the details. Oil paintings, you probably know something about them, right? I asked sheepishly. Su Yiming shook his head. Honestly, it's a different system. I don't know much. This was beyond awkward. But they're still paintings, just expressed differently, he said, leading me inside with composure. The gallery wasn't very large, and the sound of my crutch echoed clearly. I didn't know much about art. My only criterion was whether something looked good or not, so I strolled through absent-mindedly. Su Yiming, however, remained quiet as he looked at the paintings. Suddenly, he stopped in front of one. I looked up and saw a peculiar image. The painting depicted a bird of prey, like an eagle, violently clawing at its own beak, blood dripping as though it was trying to tear it off. The scene was so vivid I could almost feel its pain. "What's happening here?" I asked. Su Yiming said in a low voice, "I once read an article about how aging eagles would destroy their claws and beaks in an excruciating process. Only by enduring such agony could they grow new ones." I was stunned. The eagle's eyes were both agonized and resolute. Despite the unbearable pain, it resolutely tore off its beak. But that's just a humanized tale. In reality, an eagle's beak is connected to its skull. If it were truly destroyed, it'd be as good as dead. The emotions building in my chest vanished instantly. "What a lie," I muttered. Su Yiming turned to me. But the story spread widely, not because of the eagle itself, but because its spirit, its courage to be reborn through pain, moved people. Many found inspiration in it, willingly believing in an eagle willing to shatter its own beak. Scars will heal eventually. As long as you have the courage to start anew, it's never too late. I pondered for a moment before breaking into a smile. "Are you copying my motivational speech from yesterday?" Su Yiming smirked. "Thanks to Teacher Gon's guidance yesterday, I did a lot of homework." We finished the exhibition quickly. It was still early, so we wandered around the area. Passing a mall, we saw a dance studio on the first floor. Through the glass, children were practicing diligently. I turned to leave, but Su Yiming stopped me. "Didn't you preach about exposure therapy? Come on, face your inner pain." I instantly regretted making light of it. My hands trembled as Su Yiming pinned me against the glass. Not that we noticed how suggestive our posture seemed. Inside, a little girl, chubby and unsteady, tried earnestly to follow the teacher's movements. Her body type clearly wasn't suited for such rigorous training. The grueling demands of dance exams eliminated countless students, and only then would you realize how much talent mattered. As expected, the girl stumbled during a spin. I thought she would cry, but instead, she got up as if nothing had happened and continued following the teacher. At that moment, I realized this young child had already learned not to live under the gaze of others. "Looks like exposure therapy works," Su Yiming said, patting my shoulder. Only then did I notice my face was soaked with tears. "Good thing I brought tissues this time. No need to use your sleeve," he added. I wiped my tears, unable to suppress a laugh. We returned close to 8 in the evening. After saying goodbye downstairs, I tried to sneak back into the ward. But just as I reached the door, the nurse caught me red-handed. Her expression was odd. "Miss Gon, you're back." Feeling guilty, I moved to step inside, but I caught a whiff of familiar perfume mixed with a scent of disinfectant. The door creaked open to reveal a woman sitting on my bed. She was beautiful, around her 40s but well-maintained, looking more like she was in her early 30s. Though she smiled, there wasn't the slightest warmth in her eyes. "Gon Chi," she called my name, and I felt my heart race uncontrollably. The door closed tightly as the caregiver left. Now, it was just me and the woman in the room. Despite the spacious surroundings, I felt suffocated, as though the air had been sucked out. Such a major incident. If I hadn't asked her father, "Were you planning not to tell me at all?" Her restrained anger broke through her facade. Her eyes locked onto my injured leg, burning with fury, like a demon from the depths of hell. "I heard about your accident, and at first, I was relieved it happened after the competition. But when I asked, I found out you didn't even place. Were you slacking off? Not training properly? You're an adult now, don't you have any self-discipline? Don't you understand how crucial this competition was for your future?" Her high heels clicked across the room, each step like a dagger driving into my chest. "You should have won this year. Do you think you can count on next year?" She turned to me with a sneer. "Do you think you'll even have another chance?" This was exactly why I'd lost the courage to keep living. I screamed and swept everything off the bedside table with one wild motion. The sound of shattering glass brought in the caregiver and then a nurse. I thrashed and yelled, throwing myself at the wall over and over. Hands tried to hold me back, but I broke free with surprising strength.
Quick.
"Call the doctor." The tranquilizer began to take effect, and drowsiness washed over me. Pinned down on the bed, I saw her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. She stood against the wall, helpless and trembling.
She was afraid of me.
The doctor arrived, and his anger was palpable.
Who are you?
"How many times have we told you that the patient must not be agitated? What if something happens? Can you bear the consequences?" Warm blood trickled down my forehead to my neck. The pain should have been unbearable, but I felt strangely numb. "Chi-Chi, I'll come visit you another day," she said, her voice faltering. I nearly laughed aloud. Half conscious, I drifted into a long, surreal dream. A dream of my life. Dancing had been my everything. In my earliest memories, my parents were always fighting. Among the sound of breaking dishes, my mother would weep bitterly. "I gave up everything for you, for Chi-Chi. Do you know how much I sacrificed after leaving the dance troupe when I got pregnant?" My father was always busy with work. My mother had willingly given up her career for the family. Or perhaps it wasn't so much willing as it was an act of helpless compromise. She hoped family life would fill the void in her soul. But sadly, nothing could ever replace what she had lost. Her marriage was a miserable mess. A troublesome baby and an absent husband were no substitute for the days when she danced freely on stage. She regretted it, but she was trapped. From the moment I could remember, her face was a perpetual mask of indifference. No matter what I did, she didn't care, except when I was dancing. Only then did she smile with genuine joy. I loved dancing. I had to love dancing. When the instructor corrected my movements, my mother's eyes stayed glued to me, intense and focused. She would say, "Chi-Chi, you're talented. Don't waste your potential." I nodded, selling my life to her dream from that moment on. Yet no matter how hard I danced, my parents still divorced. Since my mother didn't have a job, custody was awarded to my father. After that, I rarely saw her. Later, my father remarried. His face grew brighter, and he seemed happier, always appearing with my stepmother. Not long after, they had a child of their own. A child born of love, and expectation was different. That child captured everyone's attention. My father no longer had time for me. I became completely alone, and my mother remained the only spark in my life, the only warmth that drove me to keep going. To win her approval, I threw myself into dancing. I got into the best dance academy. I vowed to fulfill her dream, to stand at the center of the stage and see her smile again. I wanted her to love me. Someday, I thought, she would turn her gaze back to me. I gave everything I had for that reunion, but I never expected it to come sooner than planned. A month ago, 3 days before the competition, I saw her on the street. She was as beautiful as I remembered, smiling as she held the hand of a little girl. The girl was chubby, round like a plump candy ball. "Mommy, I want cotton candy," the girl said. Cotton candy. I had never eaten cotton candy in my life. When I was young, my mother told me sugar would make me fat. I needed to dance, so I couldn't eat it. I stood across the street, maliciously hoping she would scold the child. But she didn't. She stroked the little girl's head gently. "Of course, sweetheart. Do you want the bunny or the squirrel one?" In that moment, I felt like I had plunged into icy waters. I had always known she remarried and had another daughter, but she never mentioned it and I never asked. The only topic we shared was dance. That little girl didn't need to dance. She didn't need to excel at anything. Just existing was enough to make her the best. I had given my everything, only to realize I had been wrong from the very start. The immense pain clouded my mind, leaving me disoriented. That disorientation caused a fatal mistake during the competition. No matter how hard I tried to recover, I ended up in 4th place. Why 4th? It felt like a cruel reminder. Just a little more effort and I could have placed. Because I didn't try hard enough. When I woke up, only the caregiver auntie was with me. My mom had long since run off in fright. Thinking of her terrified and twisted face, I couldn't help but laugh. The auntie told me, "Your dad just called." This time, I didn't resist making a call and immediately dialed back. "Xiao Qi, are you alright? I heard your mom visited you yesterday." I guessed he was the one who gave her the hospital address. Annoyance bubbled within me. "Could you please tell her I don't want to see her?" There was a brief pause on the other end, followed by a string of perfunctory responses. Oh, alright. Before I could react, he quickly moved on to the real reason for his call. "Your brother has exams coming up and I really can't spare the time. Just focus on recovering in the hospital. I've already spoken to them to extend your stay, and the fees are taken care of." I suddenly wanted to laugh. All this time, I thought my parents were incapable of love, that they couldn't give what they didn't have. But that wasn't it. It was just because it was me. He wasn't done talking, but I'd already stopped listening. What had my life been for? The autumn wind blew leaves into the room, and the auntie closed the window. So autumn was almost here. Lying on the bed, staring at the plain white ceiling, I made up my mind to die. I don't like cold weather. Before it arrived, I wanted to say goodbye to Su Yiming, but I ultimately gave up the idea. Not everyone can be a hero. I couldn't save him. Someone with death in their heart couldn't possibly convince another to give up on dying. I put on my favorite dress and left the hospital once the caregiver stepped out. I used to think sunsets were beautiful, but at this moment, I found the darkness of the night much more fitting for me. Deep into the night, there wasn't a single soul by the lake. I sat on the stone railing, contemplating my final words. "Aren't you cold?" A familiar voice rang out behind me, startlingly clear in the night. I turned around in disbelief and, sure enough, saw Su Yiming. Goodness, why did I keep running into him everywhere? He approached step by step, but at least he had the decency not to sit beside me. "I've been looking for you for a while." I was stunned. Looking for me? Why? To get my money back, of course. He was dead serious. The amusement park tickets. You and I aren't close enough for you to cover them. I was at my wit's end. "You're unbelievable, Su Yiming." How could I not be? To end up in the hospital just like you? His response left me laughing in frustration. "Fine, I'm rich. Happy now? Let's just say I got a free playdate that came with a ticket package. Didn't you bring me to the amusement park to cheer me up?" Glaring at him, I retorted, "Don't flatter yourself. I just wanted to go, and you happened to tag along." For once, my terrible attitude rendered him speechless. The cold wind swept around us in silence. Suddenly, Su Yiming pulled out a coin. Right before my eyes, he tossed it into the river. "You said any wish could come true, didn't you? Gan Qi, will you not jump?" Su Yiming extended his hand toward me. "It was never a coincidence. I've been following you all along." This world, how could it be so absurd? Once upon a time, there was a patient who desperately sought death. She didn't realize how the way she stared out the window had given her away. So, when she stepped onto the rooftop, someone had followed her there. The rooftop was locked because I stayed up all night making phone calls to report it. It's not that you kept running into me. I kept following you. That day at the amusement park, when I asked if you could give up the idea of dying, I meant it. I shook my head in anguish. Why? Because I want you to live. I found it absurd. You're such a selfless saint, aren't you? The wind tousled his hair as Su Yiming replied gravely, "No, I'm not. I'm selfish. If you really died in front of me, I don't think I'd ever sleep peacefully again." Still, he stubbornly held out his hand, his gaze imploring. "Today isn't a good day, is it?" I could hear the violent thumping of my heart, so loud and clear. Scorching tears streamed down my face as I trembled uncontrollably, crying into the lake's reflection. I finally broke down, grabbing his hand, and he pulled me into a firm embrace. Tears flowed endlessly, as if they would wash away years of anguish. He held me with one arm, gently patting my back. We stayed there for a long time in the dark, until my emotions settled. Then he took my hand and walked me back slowly. The hospital corridor was eerily quiet late at night. He stood outside my room and said, "Get some good sleep. Tomorrow, in the daylight, I have a secret to tell you." I nodded. I thought I wouldn't be able to fall asleep, but I was out as soon as I hit the bed. When the Annie woke me up the next day, I was still groggy. "Miss Gone, why did you sleep in your clothes?" I turned over, burying my face in the blanket.
I was so tired.
When I finally woke up, the auntie had already brought lunch. Remembering the promise from the night before, I quickly called him. "Su Yiming, me downstairs?" A warm male voice answered, "Don't rush. Finish your meal first." His tone was so soft it felt unreal. Still, I ate my meal, called him again, and hobbled on my crutch to the elevator. Su Yiming stood downstairs, turning with a smile as soon as he saw me. In that instant, I felt the sunlight's warmth and brilliance. We sat in the garden, surrounded by stillness. I couldn't hold back my curiosity. "How did you know I was going to that building?" He spoke quietly. "I've been watching you all along." Puzzled, I asked, "Watching me?
Why?
Su Yiming sighed. "If you didn't truly have those thoughts, you would have noticed. The night you were rushed to the ER, I was right beside you. That night, there was a massive car accident with multiple injuries. A child got a scrape and wouldn't stop crying. You gave her your bunny hair tie." His words pulled me back to that painful day, though I could only recall vague fragments. There was a child crying, I think. I only did that because she was noisy. He smiled but said nothing more. Then something in his words clicked in my mind. "Su Yiming, what exactly do you do?" He didn't hesitate. "I'm a medical resident." Of course. Of course. I should have figured it out. Why else would he have been in the consultation room during that medical dispute? Apart from patients and their families, only doctors and nurses would have been there. No wonder the nurses at the hospital were so familiar with him. They were colleagues. He had said he was right beside me in the ER that night. Yes, my memories were clearing up. He was the white coat who tended to my wounds. Su Yiming was a medical resident. Medical students spend ages in school. He must have just started working, only to encounter a catastrophic incident that could have derailed his career. He really was unlucky. Noticing me staring at his hands, Su Yiming immediately said, "Dr. Wang's hands were more important than mine." He rambled on, as if venting pent-up emotions. I wasn't trying to be a hero, but when I realized it, I was already shielding the doctor. I was terrified. After all those years of hard work to get into med school, to finally start my career, only to face something like that. Su Yiming looked at me intently. "Actually, I lied to you. My hand wasn't as badly injured as I let on. It was fractured when the attacker pinned me, but it'll heal, and I'll still be able to practice medicine." I couldn't say a word. So, from the start, what I thought were coincidences were actually a one-sided redemption. The autumn wind swirled as he leaned closer. "Just like you worked hard to make me cherish life again, can you give me a chance? Let me prove that this world is still worth living in for you." Another summer came, and the cicadas outside the hospital building were making such a racket that it was hard to sleep. I stretched lazily and looked up. A certain busy person was flipping through the patient records in his hand. Awake. Su Yiming pinched the bridge of his nose. There were faint dark circles under his eyes, and he looked much more worn than the pure, youthful man from last year. I couldn't help but sigh. Studying medicine really ages people. "You must be hungry. Let me change clothes, and then we'll go eat." Su Yiming put down the records and suddenly came over to lean lazily on my shoulder. "I really want a break." I couldn't help but laugh. The training should be over in 2 months, right? You should have time for a vacation. He squinted and hummed. Maybe. I couldn't help but imagine. Why don't you come with me to Hongsuan for a sketching trip? The autumn scenery there is beautiful. Su Yiming gave me a look. You just had surgery. Don't rush to travel. I gazed out the window at the flourishing camphor trees, and my thoughts drifted back to last summer. Who would have thought that Director Wang, who fortunately wasn't injured in that medical dispute, was a bones specialist? He had arranged a consultation for me last year. The surgery was scheduled for this year, and it was done in 3 sessions. Although I could never return to my original state, I could still dance. I remember on the day I returned to school, my teacher seriously told me, Xiaoqi, you're only 19. Your life is just beginning. Use this time to find a hobby. When you recover, come back to classes. The teacher said I had talent and good physical condition. Even if I didn't join a dance troupe, I could still teach dance. I cried a lot in front of the teacher. She gently stroked my head. Good girl, don't be too upset. I also had to leave the dance troupe because of an injury. You're still young. Don't dwell on it. I rented a quiet old house on a street lined with paulownia trees. I didn't go home. My dad finally remembered he had a daughter. His precious son had finished his middle school exams, and he finally had time to visit me at the hospital. By the time he arrived, he found out I had already been discharged. We walked together on the street covered with paulownia leaves. My dad seemed a bit awkward. Chi, I didn't know your leg injury was this serious. Should I take you abroad for treatment? I smiled. Would you come with me? He went silent again. After my parents' divorce, they both had better lives and families of their own. And I was the product of their failed marriage, belonging to neither of their families. But when that night I sat on the railing, I suddenly felt that none of it mattered anymore. The water was too cold, and I had never lived for myself. It's fine. There's a very good orthopedic doctor in the country. He said I should recover first before undergoing surgery. The discomfort on my dad's face disappeared, and he genuinely looked happy. Then I'll tell your mom. I shook my head. No need. She'll come to ask when she wants to know. That day, I had a calm conversation with my dad before parting ways. He checked out my place and left in peace. In the evening, the neighbor downstairs had dinner ready. Su Yiming's grandfather, wearing an apron, waved at me. Xiaoqi, come eat. I hurriedly responded. The house was one Su Yiming had introduced to me, and it wasn't until I moved in that I realized it was his grandparents' old home. They were extremely hospitable, often inviting me for meals. At first, I felt awkward, but Su Yiming said he hoped I could keep his grandparents company. Later, I found out that Su Yiming's mother had suffered from postpartum depression and jumped off a building when she gave birth to her second child, who also passed away shortly after. That was why he could immediately tell I was thinking of ending my life. The regrets of his youth led him to medical school, full of enthusiasm, determined to be a doctor who saved lives. Even so, don't you think you're overdoing it with how you care for your patients? Su Yiming paused as he was tying my shoelaces, his face inexplicably flushed. You're not my patient. I laughed. Then what is this? He refused to say anything more and quickly turned to leave with a hurried step.